Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council adjourned meeting of Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Albertson. Bueller. Danforth. Lallam. Manty absent. Roby.
Here.
Solom.
Here.
Thorson absent. Vilhauer.
Here.
Y. Thank you.
The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and I would like to add an item right away of just a general visit back onto the external organization conversation. I'm hearing that there's kind of some unfinished business. So, Glenn, do you want to?
Oh, do you want to approve the agenda?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda with that modification?
So moved with the modification.
Moved by Bueller, second by Danforth. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, now Glenn.
I don't have any specific requests. I mean, if anybody else wants to jump in any time as far as a specific suggestion. But I know there's been some conversation going on amongst any number of us that I don't think we feel comfortable with the whole process relative to funding the external organizations. They're all wonderful causes. I don't suggest that we cut the legs out from anybody for 2018 because they're banking on the funding. But I know there's been conversations in the past that why are we as a city even involved in funding a lot of these organizations, and I think that list grows every year. There's dozens more out there that would like to be added, I'm sure. I just like to throw the idea out that going forward, I'd be receptive to some other process or changing what we would do completely relative to funding external organizations. So I just want to broach that subject tonight for food for future thought is why I want to get it on the agenda.
Glenn, I would agree with you, and it seems like every year when we go do this budget, we run into the same issue, the same concerns. Historically, at least a number of times we have met with these organizations, and you're right, every time they can give you the right answer in regards to how to justify it, and it is justified. But the difficulty is there's not enough money to go around, and there really is a question of using taxpayer dollars for those things. So I think it warrants a lot of discussion on our part to become more systematic and in the manner at which we make those decisions and the purpose for those dollars. So I agree, and you're right. It's hard to do right now. It's something that I think we need to do and not forget about until the next budget rolls around. So we need to get it done in the interim basis and come out with something that works for us next year. So
I'd like to add to that. We did have a lot of conversation in this regard a couple of years back. I was on that little committee that reviewed this 2 years ago, and I think at that time, when we had those budget or those hearings with the folks that were applying for those funds, we had stated that the upcoming year we would probably go along, and we did go along with the proposals, what they were asking for. But the year following, as I recall, we said, be prepared next year. You know, there's a possibility that you may not get funding for your organization. Just so when you're doing your budgets, you know that this may happen. And I think the whole idea, our sort of our mantra back then was, we're more apt to fund organizations that help supplement city services. You know, somebody that would do something that the public does, or take some burden off of one of our city agencies that works in whatever discipline in the community. So that's kind of where we were, and now I think, personally, I think that's where we need to go with this.
I just would say that's kind of how I recall it too, Bruce. I was not on the committee, but I remember talking about this even to the point where we thought maybe if we're going to do this, we just have a set of funds and then we hand it to somebody else. And we, just as an example, we talked about going to the Watertown Community Foundation, and that's what they do is they hand out funds to nonprofits. But the flip side of that is we're the council. We're the ones that decide where the money is spent. So that kind of goes contrary to that. I think this issue, for those that have been around for a while, I think it comes up every, 4 or 5 years. This comes up and we go through the same arguments every year. I know when I first got on, I questioned why we're doing that. I mean, again, all great organizations, really tough to say no because there's a great reason to say yes. But is that why we tax the citizens, is to, give the charitable organizations? But, Bruce, I will just second what you said, that's kind of what I recall.
Mayor, on that note, I would, and I've shared thoughts, I think, with yourself and Glenn and Bruce earlier this week in regards to the denial on the sex trafficking. The request, I think, was $3,000, I believe was what it was. I don't believe that is a church mission. I think it was something that was established here in town as a cause, and it just fell within that church environment to have a home, so to speak. It really is not the church mission. It's a mission of the community that's where they call home, at least at this point. I don't see that cause, that need, any different than we have a DARE program or that we have the Watertown Fire Department that does their education for the firehouse that they do and the training for kids. I think it falls within that same area because those items, they're real. It's a state initiative as well. And we are seeing it here. We're at a crossroads. They keep talking about the I-29 corridor and how that is a lane for the sex trafficking. And I would like to personally see us reconsider that $3,000, and eventually maybe what we need to do is put it into the Watertown Police Department budget because it is a crime issue. And maybe that's where the dollars need to go, and that effort needs to be a branch of the Watertown Police Department. But I would like to see this council reconsider that $3,000. So,
I've been involved in some similar discussions where, if this comes up, should it be part of the police department budget? Same discussion.
I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that we do spend money on this out of our police budget because I think we have on our staff some pretty highly trained individuals or individual that work on it. There's no one from the police department here to say if that's true or not. But my question is, do we already spend money out of the police budget on this effort? Is it enough relative to our efforts against drugs and our efforts against robberies and our efforts against other police matters? I mean, I know we have an expert on our staff, and maybe that person was completely trained and funded by state money and not city money. I don't know. But where do we draw the line, and why are we going? Is it not enough that we're spending? I think that the police department should be part of this conversation. I asked Marty Jackley about this after attending the gathering at the event center where there was a movie shown, and it's very disturbing. And Marty happened to be in town right after that, and I asked him, as the chief prosecutor for our state, how big is this problem in our community? And he said, I'm not aware of any arrests that have been made yet, even though we have a lot of resources put that way. Is that because we don't have enough resources, that it's going on all over in our community and we just haven't caught anybody yet? Or that we have caught people, but he's just not aware of it and I'm not aware of it? Are you guys aware of it? Have we made arrests? Again, the police department should be here for this conversation.
And I agree, Sarah, on that. But
don't
I
know the
wonder
answers
if
to those.
do we have an opportunity after tonight to have the representatives from the organization? I think Chief VTech is very involved in that. I know there are others. We could have Chief McPeak here as well, and we could find out what value is being brought, what effort and value is being brought to the community with the external, and how that compares to what we're doing internally, making sure that the two efforts are really working as one effort and that we're not crossing over and duplicating. Because it might be that we count as a Wardtown Police Department that we do see the value. It's just that that's where the other efforts are going. So,
Right. Are you
do we
just
have
talking about that one thing, or in general all of them, or? I mean,
right now? I think it would be very hard for us without rhyme and reason to make any significant cuts out of what we've done in the past. I think that would be very unfair to those organizations. I think we have to have a basis for what we do, which is what Don and Bruce and I had suggested that we work on now after this budget. But for this budget, I'm specifically talking about those dollars for the sex trafficking request.
okay.
And I would like to see, you're right, we do need the police department here, and we do need those representing that request here so that we can understand how it all works together, so that we aren't having two different efforts going on, that there's some effort that it works together with and that there's value.
Right, and I'm not opposed at all to that. If you want to squeeze that in, I don't know where the time would come.
Shelley, what do we have as far as opportunity? Can motions be made and adjusted to the budget a week or 2 weeks or the last day that we go to approve the budget? Where are we
No,
at on that?
the budget is a 2-reading ordinance, so any changes to the ordinance you'd have to put at least 5 days in between that decision, so we'd have to have a special meeting. You have to have a budget adopted by the 30th of September. And so I'm running out of time just a little bit. I guess what I would tell you for $3,000, if it's something that you would want to support, I think in 2018 you can amend the budget. You can do a contingency transfer to authorize that to be given. Right. If that, or you can make a motion right now to put it back in.
Shelley,
So-
if we did that, if we did go to the contingency, would that put it as a line item for the next budget cycle?
No, basically in 2018 they would need to come forward with a request, and it
Okay.
would go to a council meeting, and you guys would determine to appropriate whether it's fund balance or contingency to pay for that request. Otherwise, like I said, if you guys are
Might be easier.
something that you want to do right now, then you can make that change and change the proposed budget.
You're saying have the discussion after we get through the budget
Right.
so that we have time. And I'm okay with that because either way, I think the end's going to be the same. The end result's going to be the same. Whatever we as a body agree with, either going to do it or not do it. And as long as we can take care of it that way,
Yeah, it's a
it's
pretty
not
small
going to
item.
impede us next year in regards to the budget as far as I'm sure that request, if we do approve, it's going to be there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that is the right way to do it. But I hope we do have that consideration, that discussion. I agree, Mayor, it's important that we do bring in the appropriate people from the PD and the organization.
I talked to Mayor about this before. I didn't come to the meetings last week, but a couple of weeks ago about this issue. And, I mentioned that 2 meetings ago, I think it was, that we assigned a policeman that we would, as a city, would have a policeman help with this sex trafficking. I don't think that was going to be an extra duty, but that we would have one available. And I was in agreement, too, that I thought we should take a look at it, but then I wasn't gone, so I'm glad it's get brought up tonight, because I think it's a very worthy item for us to discuss for the city and for the state and for our kids.
I'm good with that. I think that'd be a good way to handle it.
I guess I'd like to circle back to my opening comments too. I'd be in favor of an ad hoc committee being put together in the interim now, just to review the whole process relative to these organizations in general going forward, so we don't get bogged down again next year and have the same conversation and 5 years from now, and still nothing is changing except the list grows every year. So I guess I would encourage you to put together a group of representatives from this organization, whoever else is needed, to review our process.
Well, and Glenn, I will just say, and I think it's a great idea, but this is kind of what we did before. But I think where we dropped the ball was when we had a separate group that did the interviews the following year. I'm nothing against anybody who was involved with that, but
No,
maybe we didn't communicate that across.
No, I'm not suggesting a group to sit down with the organization, because I was part of that.
No, that's not what I mean.
Okay.
But I'm saying I think that we'd made those decisions. I thought we did, but it just never got carried over with the next group that did the interviews. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Get it done.
All right. Next item is presentation, review, and public input on the mayor's proposed 2018 city budget, a park and recreation fund. Jay, you want to?
Well, we'll start out with the supervision division. Some of the accomplishments there, we'd like to welcome John Small and his staff and facility on board with the Parks and Recreation and Forestry Board. The Civic and Recreation Board was eliminated during the past year, and John came under our umbrella, and we enjoy working with him and his staff. Another accomplishment for 2017 was the Assistant Director position was added to the department. Terry Kelly, and his emphasis is on the golf course and City Park, Mount Hope Cemetery, as well as Prairie Lakes wellness divisions, as well as working with trying to see what we can do to increase revenue. So going on from that, budget, not a lot of changes in the budget for supervision, but the primary change would be in the publication and recording fees, and we're looking at that for more department-wide marketing and advertising. A lot of times if, say, City Parks and the Aquatic Center and the golf course want to put an ad together, it's kind of divvying out of all the different budgets, so this way we can do this type of advertising and keep it under one line item. So that, if there's no questions, we can go on to recreation programs. And again, one of the main accomplishments there was, again, the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center and the 4 gyms that are under the rec programming aspect of it.
Jay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Can I back you up for just a minute?
Yeah.
I want to touch on the revenue side of the Park and Rec budget. I want to make sure I understand that the $2 million, the other financing sources, as I understand it, Shelley, that's 1.7 from the general fund, 250,000 from the capital improvement fund, and 50,000 from the bed, booze, and board fund. Correct? Okay. When have those numbers, those amounts changed last? I mean, I'm looking at 15, 16, 17, proposing the same numbers for 18. Do you know right offhand when that those amounts have changed last?
I don't. I know we went in the general fund. I remember going from 1.5 to 1.6, 1.6 to 1.7, and then it's pretty much stayed there. I know we didn't used to have a transfer from the second penny sales tax, and when we were having some issues trying to get capital replaced with our revenues shortages, that was added, and that's probably the last. So I would say 13, 14, because I know 2011 we were really struggling, and we kind of tried to make some changes and do some additional cuts and get some capital put in there and find some additional revenue sources. So probably 12, 13, 14, we started working at trying to make some of those increases and get some of those. I don't know that the third penny sales tax, that probably hasn't changed since I've gotten here. I think it's been 50,000 forever.
Do we have a justification for using a little bit more of that to fund the Park and Rec?
A little bit more of what?
The bed booze, the third penny sales tax.
If it was available, we could, but that's the problem is, like, for 2018, we're already anticipating using about $40,000 more than what we're anticipating receiving. So
but there is about as of the end of last year, about 337,000 that was available going into 2017. So obviously we're using some of it in 17 and budgeting some for 18.
Right, in available fund balance. Is that what you're talking about?
I just want to put the thought in our mind as we look through some of the expenditure side of things. If there are some options of looking at other areas for some additional revenue for the Park and Rec.
Right. Well, and that's where that whole discussion with City Park came, and you know, I mean, this is why it's important that if they collect user fees, they need to continue to collect those, because they do make a difference in the overall operations, and you know, and with the third penny, there's a lot of other things that depend on that. So you just, you know, I'm a little more leery about digging into those fund balances too hard, because like, if we would ever have something that would happen with the event center, we don't really have a good place to take some of those, if they're maintenance type issues, to take that out of those type of things. So we're a little more restricted in that part of it. But yeah, I mean, that was part of what Terry Kelly has been charged with, and he'll probably be happy when I go, because I remind him quite often during this budget process that, you know, it's easy to cut expenses, but it's a short-term fix to a long-term problem, and we need to find ways to balance what we're doing all the way around, and figuring out why our revenues aren't keeping up with the expenditures, and how do we maybe make some changes, think outside the box, and rearrange some of our resources and efforts so that we're maybe getting a little bit closer, or figuring out how to add more of a revenue subsidy to them.
Thanks, Shelley.
Any other questions on supervision? Okay, then going on to the Recreation Programming Division. Again, I was mentioning earlier that opening the new Prairie Lakes Wellness Center and having the 4 gyms on the Park and Rec side of it has been very interesting, and it's going to be even more interesting this fall and winter, as we will have a full complement of programs that will be conducted over there. We did have some successful tournaments this spring, and we're looking forward to really making as great a use of that facility as we can. Program changes this year. Staff started some new adaptive programming for youth that are not really into sports or large crowds, things like gardening and the arts. And these programs really went off well. I think all the programs that were conducted were full, and just another nice alternative of programming for residents of the community.
Jay, can I interrupt just 1 second? On that note, when we talk about programs, do we have a compiled list of all the things that we offer, and if they're age group specific to denote what range they are, and what fees are associated to each one of them? I'm trying to get a visual in my mind as we talk about programs. I don't know what these things cost. I don't, when I go to the volleyball league, I don't know what that costs for somebody to be in a volleyball league or a basketball league or pickleball league or whatever they are, right? So you have a complete list of all the things that you offer.
Yes, all the defined programs would be listed.
Would there
the
be
fee
something that we
structure.
could get that from our standpoint to see what that is?
Sure.
If you would?
And Mike, we have a detailed profit loss on each program. What we look at is direct expense. We don't look at full-time staff, but we do look at, shirts, awards, referees, scorekeepers. What we do is we break that down, divided by what we anticipate for participation, and we never do a loss as far as that program. We do not account for full-time staff. Let's say No, you know, the direct expense. If we know we have 500 awards, we have 3,000, in referees, we divide that by our anticipated number of teams. Let's say it's, so we do have that, and we never have an intention of a loss. We typically don't do a large gain, but we do make sure that we cover our direct expense for the city, if that makes sense. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are we cutting any programs this year? I know we add things. I see lacrosse is on the docket here, but how often, and can you give me an example of something getting cut this year?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at revenues right now, we got a $23,000 decrease. And what we did is we over anticipated the wellness center, to be honest. We had to throw it out in the dark, thinking we're going to offer a 6 foot and under basketball league, co-ed basketball league, and obviously we found that 4 gym spaces really didn't provide us enough time to offer those. So we went back and looked at legitimate revenue, found what we are going to do, and we did lose that amount of money, but.
Terry, just a thought. I just question: can we partner with the middle school for any of those programs?
We've had a meeting. The mayor's been involved in a meeting about shared facility joint use. They're open to it. We're open to it. The difference is the schedule side. We don't know when they're going to have junior high basketball games. We don't know if the high school is using it, so it's so hard for us to do an 8-week league and plan on having that dedicated to us. There may be something that comes up that we lose that facility and don't have a backup. So we haven't at this point, no.
Do we maintain any kind of a document that would show usage and scheduling that could be worked up with different facilities? So we know at a given time what's used where. So if you're going to use it, you plug it in. It has to be on that document. What it is, what time it is. Is that something that we would consider? Or
it's something we use now, just for the multiple of facilities that we have that we oversee. We're full of Outlook calendars. I mean, we have from softball complexes to flat floor space to ice arenas to whatever. I mean, we document everything. We know at every given time what's available, what's not available, what's booked, the trends of how often it's booked. Yeah, I mean, we have all that.
So if I'm at one facility, there's a single source document I can go to, and I can see what's going on in that facility. If I'm somewhere else in the city.
You as a consumer, no.
No, I'm talking about interdepartmental.
Interdepartmental, John, and the Wellness Center and ParkandRec have came up with a calendar system, so the Wellness Center knows when ParkandRec's going to be in those gyms, but the consumer side, no. I mean, you can't go onto a website to know if there's a corner.
No, I'm not asking about consumer, Terry. I'm just talking interdepartmental.
Interdepartmental, and we looked at working with the CVB at the same. They got a calendar system that we could put all the way from Premier Softball Complex to Cook to the Wellness Center to the field house and be able to completely see everything that's going on when it's open and when it's not. We do have that capability. We haven't pursued it, but it's there.
And further to answer your question, Don, some of the programs too can be a little hit and miss based on instructor availability, that type of thing.
Yeah, sorry, Don, I didn't finish, but an example like day trips, for 15 to 20 years, day trips were huge. We'd go to a Twins game, we'd go to Valley Fair, we'd go to Wildwater West, and what we found is those numbers have completely dwindled. We cannot get enough interest to justify the cost of transportation, and we pulled them. And that's part of this $23,000 is we banked on $5,000 of revenue from that, but we pulled it. So that's part of that $23,000 is, beating a dead horse is basically what it is. Years ago, the parents, and I don't know if it's a trust issue, if it's just everybody's lives are busy, but yeah, there's definitely things when we see we're not maintaining or doing whatever we do, pull programs.
And another resource that we'd like to become more involved with and continue discussions with the Lake Area Technical Institute and try and work some of those students right into some of our mainstream leagues and programming, rather than doing their own thing, work them into some of ours too, to hopefully help increase some of the usage.
Who do you work with from LATI in that type of thing?
There's kind of a gal over there.
Holly Owen,
Okay.
and, you know, just,
More in charge of intramurals, and I know Josh Moggs had some contact with her, and just trying to work out some things to not only make their experience at Lake Area Tech more enjoyable, but also help out the programs.
Jay, or Terry, on the recreation, I mean, you're actually budgeting a decrease in salaries from 17 to 18. What's the rationale or explanation for that?
well, on our proposal, Glenn, we did have, if I can grab it here. Our proposal was 100,700, and obviously this process starts June. That was based on a ton of new Prairie Lakes Wellness Center programs that we have now figured that are not feasible or gym space does not allow for them. So our request dropped $20,000, and then historical data. We've looked at what we provide. In fiscal year 16, we were at 73. 15 fiscal year 16, we were at 68. So we feel just budgetary wise that we can offer all programs and additional ones within that budgetary amount. So it basically helped to balance the bottom line of the Park and Rec budget. So
The other change too that was made was that when the assistant director position was created, it was created in 2017 and filled, and so this is basically taking Terry Kelly's salary out of recreation because he's no longer the director, and then putting somebody else in its place, and that's why the increase in the supervision salaries is just putting that in with a person filled. So that's the other part on the supervision salary and why the change.
And as far as the expenditures budget, not a lot of change there. And in the 201 capital outlay, do have $3,000 to replace. That's an annual thing where we're replacing worn out and damaged baseball and softball equipment.
Maybe I'm missing something here, but under the capital outlay, the skate ramp maintenance, there's none listed for that? Will there not be a?
Actually, no. We are in the process of constructing a new skate park, and that's going to be all concrete. It is coming along very nicely, and so we won't really have. This was for things like the skate light, the skating surface that they used to use on the old ramps, and we won't have that any longer. In fact, the old skate park is history. It's been removed from the intermediate school. I think that project was completed this afternoon. So,
and Josh, that was a 15 line item that Shelley would have had to create a new line item, and I believe it hangs on for a couple years. So you're just seeing a hanging line item that was spent for that skate light material for the old skate park, but it'll probably disappear off the sheets. Correct. Thanks.
When you folks are removing that or replacing that softball and baseball, what are you doing with that old equipment?
does Josh Stills repurpose some of it and send it to Nicaragua?
As far as the skateboard?
No, on
The baseball, softball stuff.
equipment.
Terry.
You know, we've declared a surplus at the board level, and we've sent it off to Nicaragua for, you know, they have a program down there. A lot of it, from the city attorney's perspective, if it's a cracked helmet, things like that, we dispose of it for liability issues. But anything usable, we do send off to, you know, a Class 2 community or donate it to other functions. But Yeah, we definitely use it, but we make sure that we don't have anything outdated, unsafe, where other communities can use it. But through the attorney's office, we make sure that it's a safe donation, so we don't have any liability coming back to us. But majority of it's been going down south for low-income communities that, we get pictures back. It's been a great deal. Sioux Falls, Brookings, Aberdeen, us, and I believe Huron are all part of that, where they truck it down or ship it down, and low-class communities get to use our stuff. So,
And you're going through yearly and picking out the stuff that's...
yeah, and what we do 1/5, it's not rhyme or reason. Sometimes catcher's equipment lasts 7 years, sometimes bats last 3. We look at our inventory, and we spend that dollar amount based on, what's this year's need. Maybe catcher's helmet, and maybe batting helmets, maybe baseballs. But there's no shortage of being able to spend that money. So.
Sure. Thank you.
Adam and Terry, the Baseball Association used to contribute to that also
Absolutely.
we ran through it, and some of it was usable down there, but they actually will renovate them, so to speak. They'll take helmets and put new foam in and stuff. Well, whereas it would just cost us so much that they're able to do it on a volunteer basis and use them, where it's just too expensive for us to do that, and that's how they get used again. It's a good program. So.
Okay, moving on to the golf course, and I want to mention too, if you have specific questions, most of our superintendents are here tonight. Todd Walker is here. If you got a particular question on the golf course, he's sure available to answer that question. One of the big accomplishments for 2017, I think, was we had 27 holes open and in good shape for the entire season, and I think the course was very much enjoyed by the community this year. So it was great. The course stayed in good shape, and it's been going well. Todd and his staff have been involved with more of the smaller projects committees have so determined over the years, and also numerous trees. We've been removing trees, but we've also been replacing them. I think we're far ahead replacing trees as compared to the ones we've removed so far, and we plan to continue to do both removal and addition of trees around the course.
Okay, I know we've had discussions on the driving range pad, that concrete pad, and then the surface. Anything resolved on that at all that you're aware of?
Still trying to work out funding sources. We have some of the money, but how close? Do you know how close we actually are right now?
Right now, we have a commitment from the Aero Booster Club, or the quarterback, ex-quarterback club, for $3,000. I believe our quote was close to $10,000 for that concrete and turf.
$12,550 or something like that. I believe.
So even worse. But
anything from? I know we're going to talk to Great Plains Lutheran. We're going to talk to Watertown High School District.
And Levi's made those contacts. Levi has talked to Great Plains. I have not heard back. Watertown, we're working with, trying to separate the fact that I'm going to call it the quarterback club, but the quarterback club is not the same as Watertown High School. So those are separate funds, but it was kind of miscommunication thinking that was a donation from the high school, where it's truly not.
Right.
It's from a
Service club.
Support organization. And then we're looking at, Levi talked about potentially for once having a golf tournament that benefits the course versus, we have the wrestling, the basketball,
So that's still a possibility, but it's not included or being considered anywhere within this budget.
Not within the budgetary amount, no.
All right, and I think the discussion that we had last fall, about this time last year, actually, when this first came up, I think the general thought was that it would be outside of the city budget through contribution and such, and that's still the effort there.
And I think the effort's there.
Okay.
I do believe that we can accomplish it within fiscal year 18 to get private funds to make that happen.
Jay, when you guys are looking at tree removal and stuff like that, are you trying to, pick which trees are going to go down, big storms, type deal and taking those out right away versus waiting for them to hit the ground?
Absolutely. We're trying to look at those trees that are potentially hazardous, and there have been several branches that have come down and that type of thing. And primarily it involves cottonwood, but we're also getting into some of the ashes as they start maturing and dying. So, yeah, it's a process. I think Todd has, another dozen or so marked trees to be removed?
As of right now, yes.
Yeah. So it's going to be an ongoing process, and it's going to change the look of the course as cottonwood trees come down, but for the sake of safety, it's a much better deal.
Do we try to take those down in the off season then, or just as needed type deal?
In the off season and at slower times if we at all can, but if, there is something that comes up, like some of the windstorms we've had that we got to get out there immediately, we certainly will.
Okay.
Just a comment about trees in general, Jay, is the fact that you're going right around and stumping them right away too. That's really noticeable around town. I know we had that conversation a couple years ago at these meetings, and I'm glad to see that's being done.
Well, I have to be perfectly honest. It isn't immediate follow-up because it's actually two different operations. But we are, I think, on schedule that everything that was taken down this year will get stumped this fall. Not a lot. Let's see. Actually, easier to go to this sheet, but not a great change in temporary salaries at the golf course. It's pretty consistent. A $1,600 increase over last year. Budgetary items: renting machinery and equipment. Added $1,000 to that line item, and that actually, our rental cars, our 45 rental cars come out of that line item, but we also increase that a little bit to add some additional carts that we bring in for expanded 4th of July holiday use. How many carts were brought in last year?
I believe 23, and financially it was a gain, but we still need to budget for those extra 23 carts, so.
And then going on, equipment maintenance, not only at the golf course, but through the majority of divisions. You'll see that we are spending a lot of money maintaining equipment, and this kind of just gets us up to where we have historically been by increasing that slightly. And the same with irrigation equipment. If you look in 15 and 16, we were $15,000 and $13,000 in those years, so add a little to upgrade the irrigation equipment. Memberships, that's just to allow Todd and his staff a little more educational, ongoing education and that type of thing. Electricity, that again, that's primarily historical. That's where we've been running the last few years, and just to get us up to that amount.
Jay, I want to ask a question. I don't know if there's a real answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. But this last season, we did a rate increase out there that was pretty sizable, both for the play and for cart storage. And it appears by these numbers that we've seen almost a 10% reduction in memberships. Our rounds appear to be up, or estimate that they'll be up, but our membership numbers are down by about 10%. And I think we had, I don't remember the number, I want to say it was about a 10% increase or something like that. Correlation?
Roughly, yeah.
Is there a correlation with
well,
that?
I think the first correlation might be that when we were replacing the greens on the yellow course, that we lost some membership to our neighbors, and really haven't recovered them back yet. But there has been somewhat of a decline. Can you explain that further, TK?
Well, I mean, in the game of golf, Mike, I mean, golf has gone down. Just the economy is getting difficult to afford the game of golf. We did have the yellow, we didn't open till whatever it was, July 15th, the year before. I mean, the neighbors are doing pretty aggressive marketing. I would call it very aggressive marketing. You know, I've been working with Levi, you know, what I've been tasked with to get those revenues up, to come up with new innovative ways to get members back or create new memberships. But there's nothing I can correlate it to be honest. It's you know, we have had construction. We've been down, you know, goes back to the 20 years I've been here. I swear 15 of the years we've been under construction at that golf course. From adding a new 9 to redoing greens to redoing fairways, it's been difficult. But Levi and myself are working on ways to get members back. Just basically find a market, but there's nothing you can put your finger on to say this is why we're down 10%. I mean, there's really not.
I know there was a lot of concern on the overall membership and revenues with that increase. That's why I said I'm going to ask a question. I don't think there's an answer for it, but I felt we need to ask that.
Well,
that
you know,
question.
on the increase, Todd and myself, whoever else was in the meeting, you know, what we ended up doing, rhyme or reason, we are 50% of the Class 1 communities. We took from Huron to Sioux Falls, we took the average fee on everything, and you will not find us more than above 50% of the average cost, whether it's a family membership, a couple membership, an individual, a 9-hole green fee, an 18-hole green fee. We are smack dab in the middle, and we are we are one of 2 27-hole courses in the state. You know, the problem is, did we take a substantial increase? Some categories, yes. Some actually decreased. Like the youth membership actually went down $10 because we found we were high based on the state level. You know, it didn't sit well with the fact that we were under construction year and raised fees. But being honest, you know, new greens, all the work we've done, it's not cheap. You know, there's a need to pay, but we do want to keep it completely affordable. We do not want to get to a price point where all of a sudden the decision is, do I pay or do I not pay? Because then we're going to go backwards. If we lose substantial memberships like we've seen in the last 3 years, you know, we're going backwards even with a price increase. And we've got to find that magic amount is what's our product worth and how are we going to sustain memberships? And that's what we're working on.
Yeah, and before I forget, I just want to commend Todd and his crew and you guys for the way that course is this year. I've been here since 1984, and it has never looked like it has. It is absolutely wonderful out there. So it's been a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I've got the same question that you just asked, Mike, but I'm going to ask it from a different way. I mean, I'm looking at the estimated totals for 2017, the projected totals for 2018, and we're projecting an increase in the number of season passes, the number of 9-hole rounds. But then we go to the revenues, the 2017 budget, and maybe that number was too high, versus the 2018 budget. We're actually budgeting a decrease in revenues, even though we're projecting an increase in the amount of usage. Something doesn't quite make sense there. So I don't know if the 20...
Glenn, and I knew this question was going to come up, honestly. I mean, because on paper it doesn't make sense. But if you look at historical revenues, you know, the 554 and 15, the 525 and 16, and the 583, we thought, you know, we're going to be open, we're going to get our memberships back, and it didn't happen.
Oh. So the 2017 budget number is what's on the high side then?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, I do believe we over budgeted our potential.
How many tournaments have we hosted out there this year and have still left to go?
I'd have to give it Levi, but I'm going to ballpark it, Adam, at 10 to 12 at this point. Probably 8 of those being shotgun starts, which absorb our course for 6 to 8 hours.
Because that's one of the concerns I've had is people are like, well, I can't get onto the course because there's a tournament every weekend. And
Right.
I know it's not the case, but perception tends to be reality on
Right.
some of that type of items. So
Yeah, you know, and I've discussed that with Levi to see, you know, going on in the future, whether it's a higher demand for revenue. If you want to lock our course up for 6 hours for 18 holes, you know, obviously there's going to be a cost to that. We're looking at changing our fee dynamic. But yeah, we definitely have a lot of tournaments. There's a lot of people that have recognized golf tournaments are a huge financial moneymaker.
Yep.
And they are for us too as a city. I mean, when we can fill the course on a Friday afternoon, but we do have members that have an expectation to be able to play. The benefit we have, unlike say surrounding communities or whatever, is we do have 27. So there is always a 9-hole option available. It doesn't always meet the needs of our members, but at least we have that option. But we are going into this winter to look at, if we're going to shut our course down for 6 to 8 hours for a tournament, what's the realistic cost that is going to cost the host of that tournament. So it's something we recognize, Adam. I've heard it too, that there's frustrated members, the fact of every Friday, every Saturday, it seems like there's a tournament. So
When we're doing those tournaments, are we usually making more money than we would if just standard people are coming out and paying just green fees and playing for the day?
I would say that's weather driven.
Yeah.
If it happens to be a 65-degree day, we're coming out great for a tournament.
Yeah.
Because we would have had 3 golfers. If it's 85 degrees, calm wind, do we come out? I don't have that data to tell you that, but it's a difficult balance that we're going to work on, both through Jay and myself, the board, the golf committee, to find out where that fine balance is to provide open play to our membership, plus make the revenues through tournaments. So
If you can figure out how to change that weather, you let me know.
yeah.
Terry, do we bring folks from out of town? Right over here. Do we bring folks from out of town to these tournaments quite often?
Yeah.
So there's revenue probably from
I
bringing
would
those?
say we're
Yeah.
typically 60 to 70% membership within a tournament. The other 30 to 40% are whether it's next door, out of town, coming to town for the tournaments. We do have different rates for the tournament where we'll charge either, say, $15 for each golfer out there, or it may be just $15 for non-golfers. There is rhyme or reason that the board set up for fee structure, but absolutely, I would say 30% of each tournament is a non-member.
So that brings revenue to the community.
Brings revenue,
Yep.
absolutely.
Then the other item on the golf course under the 201 capital outlay, we do have, that's a T-mower that's going to be replaced for $35,000.
Gee, did we get any kind of turn-in on that? Is there any residual value in the other stuff? Are we replacing one?
Todd, do you have a trade-in on this one?
No.
You're going to turn the other one into...
We evaluate that at bid time. Generally, that's the cost of a brand new piece, and when it goes out to bid, we will receive a trade-in value when it comes in with the bid document, and then at that time, historically, we'll evaluate it, whether it's worth it for us to trade it in, or if it's too less, is there a way we can repurpose it and use it in a lesser capacity somewhere else on the golf course. Generally, those types of mowers typically go out on a daily basis, where if it can function still, to put rollers on or something where it goes out every 2-3 days and we can get by with it for a couple of years yet, we'll evaluate it at that time. Right now it's being requested to be replaced because it is getting weaker with some of the components in the hydraulics, and at its age, this stuff does go out of date, and some of the newer equipment, it is getting tough to find rebuilt parts for some of this. So, but we make that evaluation as far as any value at that time when the bids go out. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Any other questions on golf course? Okay, moving ahead to the Family Aquatic Center. It's been an interesting year at the Family Aquatic Center. I think Terry and I were talking just a few minutes ago, and I think he said that today or yesterday was the 18th day that we've been closed, which is somewhat higher than typical, correct?
Yeah, normally 5-6 days, but this has been a non-revenue producing year, put it that way. It's been difficult with, 68 degrees or rain, and so we'll battle, but actually we'll probably still meet our revenue demands. But it's been a frustrating season, I think, for both the staff and the public. So,
Terry, do you suppose the wellness center, especially with the additional pool we've got in there, is that taken away a little bit from?
Before we opened, John and myself sat down with schedules to make sure we didn't conflict open swims on both sides. So I don't think it has. I think the niche is there for the wellness center. You're gonna get the membership that is gonna work out. Have the kids go to the pool. But I think in where we're at with the limited amount of summer, when it comes to an 85 degrees day, I don't think the indoor is what they're seeking. And John and I have worked close to make sure we do alternate those times. So when we don't have open swim, John does. So really from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., someone in the community does have an open swim where they can go do it. So, but I don't think it's taken away. This year is strictly weather, Bruce. It's been a mild, rainy, and that's, normally an 85-day season. Right now, we're going to be lucky to get 70 days in. So.
One thing we did this season was partner with Pizza Ranch, and they delivered pizza, and that was very successful over the course of the season. And our health inspection ratings were very, very good this year, all year. So that's great to have that at the facility.
Terry, I know we've had this discussion before in past discussions about the budget and such, but the open swim typically is it 1 to 7?
Yes, 1 to 7 p.m.
That's the one thing that I hear about is that we've got this pool and we've got these great days in here from 1 to 7.
Right.
And I can relate to that. I know we got swimming lessons.
Right.
And then I know we're somewhat challenged at times in regards to our ability to hire lifeguards to support that. I think that's been the two things that is there a way for us to get more available open swim hours, whether you go later in the day? 7's pretty early.
Right.
Somebody gets off work at 5, go take your kids there. You only got, by the time you get there, you're going to have an hour and a half. That's the one thing that I hear
I've heard that time
regularly about that.
For years we were 1 to 4, 6 to 9. We had 2 sessions. We'd be in the afternoon and we'd do lessons from 4 to 6 p.m. Then we'd open back up 6 to 9. The argument came, they wanted succession. So we went to 1 to 7, and I won't argue with you. I've heard it, obviously my phone rings and I hear it nonstop. What we're looking at, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but John and myself have been working at potentially putting the swimming lesson program at the wellness center. Whether it's the morning session or the evening, probably preferably the evening. That would allow the outdoor to be open, say 1 to 9. Obviously, at $270 an hour is what our staffing costs are. Over 80 days, it's a larger investment to the city to staff that pool. Because right now we see it at 4 o'clock. We do what we call a safety check. We clear the pool. We'll go from 700 swimmers down to 150 at 4 p.m. So we've got to determine on the budgetary side. If we stay open until 9 for 50 swimmers, obviously we're providing it to the public, but basically that's what John and I are looking at doing, is to put those evening lessons at the indoor. There's no weather restrictions whatsoever. We know we're going to have them. At the outdoor, we get frustration from people signing up for swimming lessons. It rains, it's cold, so it's probably a better fit. And John and I just need to work out that details, which gives us, say, even 1 to 8 p.m. You get off work at 5, you still have 3 hours.
Yeah. Do you normally, when you see your decline, do you see it come back up a little bit later in the day, or does it stay down?
It stays down.
It does.
Yep.
I could see if you do that, you do have that decline in the number of people that swim, but I could certainly see the people wanting to buy the passes would go up.
Well, and I think, Mike hit it on the head. The fact if they get off at 5, it's not worth rushing to get your kids in swimsuits drive across town and get there for an hour. You know, if we were open to that 8 or 9 p.m., we'd probably see a significant increase in that evening open swim for the fact that, okay, it's worth the time to get everything ready, get the people there, and stay till 8 or 9 p.m. So it's just some details we got to work out. And like I said, for both of you, it's not a secret to me either. I've heard it, I won't say daily, but there's definitely within a season I hear it half dozen to 10 times that our hours are not the best for the working family.
Could we see a potential in increase in concessions and stuff as well? Maybe we offer, you know, like a dinner pack or something like that. You know, you can get a pizza and a couple sodas or
Absolutely.
something
And, you know,
like that.
absolutely that 5 o'clock hour.
Yeah.
You know, you do the whatever the meal deal, whatever, you know, where parents can, you know, there's all that potential. We average about $1.35 a person right now for everybody that comes through the door. Our average, like I said, $1.35 per person in concessions. That probably would increase. You know, when they come, we have meal deals, whether it's pizza, hot dogs, whatever, but absolutely. But it's until now, we've never had the place to put these swimming lessons. You know, now with the wellness center, with the 8 lanes, the 3 extra lap lanes, you know, John feels comfortable that he could provide those lessons. So it's something we got to sit down and work on and work out the fine details. And it's going to open up, you know, and we started off, you know, an 85-day season. This year we're at 70 days. You know, that's not a lot. You know, that's 6 weeks, or sorry, 10 weeks that you're open. It's not a lot, and if we can maximize that open swim time, all the better for everybody. So.
And I think that's a good idea. It was something that I was thinking about mentioning, so I'm glad that you guys are looking at that. And I think the product will be more consistent and more, it would be a better quality product for those that are taking lessons, knowing that you can go in there.
Right.
So, John, I think just turn the water up, you know, the temperature down on it.
I did have a question. With the numbers, the decrease in numbers, was there any rate increases from 16 to 17, and is there anything 17 to 18?
We have not did a rate increase for 7 years. We've been $6 for, and what I call it the tipping point. You know, we feel 6 is our product value. You know, if we go to 7, are we going to go backwards? You know, if we were trying to pay for the true operational cost of the pool, you know, I truly feel we'd go backwards. You know, it costs about $12 per person, and that's where the city subsidy comes in. What I call the 60-40 rule. What the city's willing to subsidize. Right now we cover about 75% of the cost of the outdoor pool through revenues, which is truthfully unheard of in outdoor pools to generate 75% of your true cost. So we're doing well, but I do feel if we substantially raise it to what it truly costs to be called an enterprise fund, we'd probably lose more people than we'd gain. So, but no, answer your question, we haven't raised for a number of years. Plus, we do a preseason special on season passes, which is hugely popular. So it's definitely an affordable. You're talking $1 an hour to go to the pool. Season pass, you go there 9 times, your pass is paid for. So we've kept it very affordable.
Okay, then continuing through the budget, there is an increase for in the temporary salary line item, but that's actually to, you know, Terry's required to, or Jeremy now, who couldn't be with us this evening, but they're required to have lifeguards at stations, no matter if there's 1 or 1,000 guests at the pool. So we don't have any options, and this kind of gets us more close to our actual historic use of the pool. So. Then moving on to revenues, we are looking at you know, an increase there, and that's more to keep us in line again with where we've been at historically on total revenue. So that hopefully can be attainable, especially if we get a few more sunny days than we did this year. Going through the expenditure side of it, just a couple things. Drug and lab supplies, we're constantly doing testing and monitoring with that, and this just kind of reflects price increases and where we feel we're going to be at the end of this year to make up that amount. Also, in merchandise for resale, I guess the more merchandise you have to buy, the more you're going to sell, and so that's actually good to increase that line item a little bit, because that means your concession operation is going well. And then the water line item, that the water's going somewhere where there's a slight leak or what. We are not quite sure, but you know, that's kind of, again, keeping up with historical usage at the pool. Moving on to baseball softball complex. Very fortunate this year to have added the Watertown Premier Softball Complex. We have had our inaugural tournament out there, and that went very well, a 38-team tournament. Everybody was very pleased with the facility, and the facility functioned very well through rain, through everything, so we were very pleased with that. Another big plus this year was the Cook Complex parking lot has been in ruins for many, many years, and we were able to get that hard surfaced all the way through, so that's been a great improvement out of Cook Complex. Moving on through the budget, actually personnel services is down about $10,000, but that, as we go through the budget, when Wade prepared his budget, actually the mowing crews that at one time were put under the baseball softball complex, Wade put them into his parks budget. So this decrease will be reflected by an increase in the parks budget as we move forward in the budget this evening.
Jay, why did we do that? Why do we drive a cost that's not a park away from where the cost is being applied?
Well, because Wade just still wanted to keep his mowing budget in the parks aspect of it. I guess, you know, we can do it either way to better reflect where the money is being spent, but that's what was done in this budget.
Right, certainly from a management and budget standpoint, I want to know my costs for each facility. And to take mowing away, which is required as a total cost of that facility, seems contrary to be able to know what your management costs are. So,
okay.
Jay, can I ask a question? Sure. The storage building for the fiveplex, where are we with that? And that was in the current or the past budget, I believe. But
we really didn't have.
Are we going to go the whole season without seeing that thing, or?
You know, we hopefully can get something in there this fall. You know, there was never really a budget for that.
So does it need to be in this budget then?
Well, it doesn't really need to be, because we do have $15,000 in complex amenities, you know, that we were thinking about for bases, some of the yellow tubing that goes on the field and that sort of thing. We got some of that through the project, so what I'm hoping to do is to use that money at this fall on that maintenance building. And
I know we were going to have a conversation with LATI last year.
Yeah.
And when they couldn't do it, is that my understanding?
Yeah, and, you know,
have we
were
talked to
so
them yet?
well down the list that we might look at a private contractor and work with them to see if we can get that building installed this fall, because, you know, we really do need it for storage too, so that is important.
Did we talk to the multi-district about that at all?
Never to the multi-district.
You may want to consider that. Give them a jingle up there, see if that's something they'd be interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were thinking about there, you know, would be nice to build it on site so we won't have moving expenses. I don't know, would they go out there
I don't
and build
think
it on
they
site?
like doing that. I don't know if LATI likes doing that much either, unless it's a house. What's that? Yeah, I honestly don't think they do that on site.
What size is the building?
20 by 24? I think is,
Oversized.
It's a garage
installed.
size.
yeah.
bet
I mean,
if
that's
you
what
talk-
it is, a garage.
I bet if you talk to I mean, they're always looking for projects. They're usually building houses for homeowners, but that might be an additional thing. Then if they get done with that early, they do sheds and stuff of that nature. So that might be a good aspect for them. Plus, they'd be able to put their own spin on something that's right in town.
Yeah, we sure can.
Jay, there was a fair amount of chatter out in the social media last week concerning the condition of Cook Complex Field. I know there was a few of us went out there today. Mike, you were out there, and Jay, you were out there, and Wade was out there. Do you want to address that a little bit and talk about some of the issues and thoughts that we had kicked around when we were out there today, Jay?
Sure. The big issue at Cook Complex is the drainage. We just don't have very good drainage out there. Like I was saying earlier, that the fields at Premier Fields perform very well draining. We were playing 15 minutes after the rain stopped. Well, that following Monday, we wouldn't have still been able to play very well at Cook Complex. So we just talked about some various ideas and the equipment and that type of thing to try and remedy the situation at Cook Complex. It may be difficult, but one of the things, I know Mike brought it up, was the French drains, and probably take one field and do some experimentation, try and hold the cost down, and more do it in-house and see how that functions.
I know you'd also expressed a concern about the scoreboards out there on three of the fields, in particular that they're old, they're outdated, they can't be maintained anymore. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Right. The scoreboards on fields 5, 6, and 7. We have spent tremendous time on those scoreboards this summer. Not only our staff, but hiring an electrician to go repair, because they're non-LED, and people think that it's bulbs burned out. So we try and go replace bulbs. Well, that's still not working. So we find out it's sockets, and then we're going to electrical firm to work on the socket situation. So it would be so wonderful if we could get those old scoreboards replaced, those outdated scoreboards replaced with LED scoreboards on 5, 6, and 7. Because I can remember the state tournament we had out there. We had been out there the previous week, and I got a call that week, and the person said, those lights are horrible. And I said, well, we fixed them all. They were working last week. Well, they're sure not this week, and went out there, and they sure weren't working. So then we got everybody out there again and had them running for the tournament. But now, it's the same situation. We're just it's a continual battle for Wade and his staff.
Do we have an approximate cost on what it would be to replace one of those?
We had $17,000 in the budget request. What were they? About $4,500 per, something like that.
Right.
So
And then throw an install, but that was one, and call it necessary cuts to get us within a balanced budget. I've made conversations with the local associations, from Junior Olympic to other groups, to hopefully do a private fundraiser for these. We know they're needed.
Yeah.
But in order to balance the ParkandRec budget, this was a necessary cut. But working with Junior Olympic softball, we're not sure with Lake City slow pitches anymore now that they're out Premier. If they're willing to put funds in, we have a new association, Lake City, or not Lake City, Watertown Fast Pitch. Where even if we can get it to 50% city dollars and 50% private donation, but the $17,000 strictly just didn't fit in the budget this year. But definitely, anybody who's been out there, Bruce and John, huge issue. I think Foundation probably deals with the same thing.
Yeah, I think the scoreboards are. Absolutely, we have to do something with those. And I noticed that on the northeast field, the paint is all coming off that scoreboard. But just a couple other items too that we might want to look into. I'm not here to complain. These are some things that I had some thoughts in. And John and I have talked about this a little bit too, and that is Oh, like around the trees, that bark or whatever you use, it seems to spill out all over the sidewalks. And it'd be nice if we could somehow contain that or put something different in there that would stay where it's supposed to be. And then, of course, I would say to the southeast of the concession stand, that whole area where the sidewalk is, the weeds and the dirt. I mean, it really looks rough. I mean, that'd be nice to be able to. I mean, beautiful work out there. I don't want to take anything away from that, but those are some areas that I think we could still use a little bit of improvement on. One other thing I'll mention, and John didn't think it was an issue, but during a tournament, I went out there just to look at these things, and this is a couple weeks back, and on the state softball, women's softball tournament, JO, and they were parking all the equipment right next to the path, right on the outside of so it was right there in front of where the fence where people might want to stand. And it'd be nice if we had a different place, I think, to stage that, or if we need a building or whatever the heck it is to put this resurfacer for the AgriLime, and the hand tools were all piled up out there right off on top of the grass. It looked to me pretty bad, in my opinion.
Okay, and we'll sure talk about that, but one thing that, the staff was doing too was trying to position themselves in areas where they could see multiple scoreboards and know what field they had to report to next and that type of thing as well.
And I think Glenn started the meeting off with it is, we've been tasked with a $2 million transfer for multiple years, and we know scoreboards are needed. We know staging areas, but we just, the revenue's not keeping up with the expenditures. So it's nothing new to us. We know we'd love to have in a staging area, to have a dedicated shop or, garage that we could put those in. The drainage issue at Cook, we know it's an issue. Facebook it's hard to watch when you're a Facebook user and you see your department get beat up, but you understand the reasoning of, it comes down to dollars and cents, to be honest. Whether it's staff, whether it's equipment, we're challenged. We're dealing with a 30-year-old complex that doesn't have drain tile, that's got the original.
Well, let's make it clear, we're not talking about the concrete. We're talking about the fields themselves.
Absolutely.
So just so people don't, because we did all that new concrete with all the storm drains.
And that's beautiful, but we're going back to the scoreboard conversation of, to balance our budget, we just simply couldn't do the 3 new scoreboards, so we're gonna look at an 8 that looks like a 6. We're gonna have to set our equipment up next to the fence because we don't have a storage building. But that's what's necessary to balance our budget, and we understand that, and we work within our means. It's difficult, and we're trying to find the revenues to balance this, to find out new ways to get these equipment. So it's a tough conversation, Bruce, is basically what it is. So.
Well, in our meeting today, and Glenn and I, Jay, and Wade were out there, and it's easy to read Facebook. I mean, we all know what that does. But to hear some of the challenges out that are there, I mean, and the golf course sees the same thing at times. It's hard to get your manning early in the season, and you lose them early in the or late in the season. So it's you're pinched, and so there are both those issues. Some of them are decades-old problem that we have out there with drainage, and so I think the key to that is let's try something, and that's where we talked today about the French drainage. Let's try it, see what it does. They've worked very effectively over at the stadium, and they do require a little maintenance over time, but they work, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than putting drain tile in and ripping up your whole infield. But the one thing that I had a question about and I have concern about is we bought a new groomer, specifically a groomer made for this type of product area, 2 years ago, or was it last year?
Last year.
Last year. How has that worked out for you?
It works out well. We just probably haven't used it as frequently as we should have, to be perfectly honest.
How are we going to do now 5 more fields with still one groomer?
That will be difficult. That thing is going to be moving around quite a bit and have to be trailered back and forth to the different fields, because we're going to be looking at what now, 7, 11, 16 different ball fields that we'll be maintaining, so it will be difficult. And I know Wade, in his plans, he does want to see that groomer used more and more and digging those fields up on a more regular basis, so we can soften them up a little bit and reduce the hardness, especially at Cook Complex right now.
And that, because that will help out with your drainage problem too.
Yeah.
So are we going to be spending more time with labor, with window time, than we are grooming fields by moving them back and forth? I mean, that's way across town.
It definitely does take time. I suppose that would, from Cook to Premier Complex, would probably be a 10-minute travel for sure to get over there.
Probably more than that by the time you load them and unload them, do everything. But, and then we have to do that every day.
Yeah.
I mean, of the week. So, we had talked. Glenn had mentioned something about a reserve. Did you get a chance to look into that today?
Yes, I discussed that today with Shelley, and she explained to me how that reserve works, and she could probably explain it better than I. But basically, it's based on you want to at least hold 2 months of expenditures back from your budget, so they base it on what the expenditure was for the year times the 12 months, and then again times 2, and that's a number that they want to basically keep in your reserves. And we're at, I think, in our Park and Rec fund, we're at about $680,000 right now, and our reserve would say that we should be in the $640,000 range. Is that correct, Shelley? So, in a nutshell, without Shelley's expertise, that would be an explanation.
When have we had any significant dollar requirements come out of that fund, that reserve?
Okay, so accounting lesson for you. I know you love them, except for Glenn. The Park and Rec Fund is very similar to the general fund. It's its own standalone fund, and it has its, nine divisions that come out of that fund. So they, just like the general fund, everybody basically plays in the same sandbox, and you use the same cash, fund balance, revenues, expenditures. They're all looked at together. So at the end of the year, you look at what the total expenditures were, irregardless of what the budget is. You look at what totally was spent and what totally was brought in revenues. And they'll either exceed it or they'll have a deficit, just like the general fund. And they will use that unallocated fund balance that they keep in that Fund 201 to compensate for any differences. And that's everything taken in totality. So, a little history. In 2011, we kind of hit a bit of a crisis point with the Park and Rec Fund. They had continuously been exceeding expenditures and not getting the revenue sources, so they were continuously using fund balance. Even when we started the budget balanced, if you don't make those revenues and you spend more than what you anticipate, you have a negative impact. So it was to a point where something needed to happen, or they were going to get into a basically cash in, cash out basis where you don't have any cushion. You can't spend more than what you are making. And so I believe it was Terry Jorgensen at the time, and we sat down and really took a look at why are we not meeting our revenue expectations, what's going on, and worked really hard at being more realistic about those, and then really looking at the expenditures and finding places that might have been just, I don't want to call it padding because it's really not, but it's just, overinflating operating costs when they really didn't need to be there. And we've done a really good job at building that fund balance up from, $70,000, $80,000 to where it is today. So in the past 3-4 years, they've done a good job of being realistic about revenues and coming up with the cuts that are needed to balance that budget and not anticipate using fund balance. And so they've built that back up. So just like the general fund, when we made the determination to buy the equipment last year and use fund balance reserves intentionally, the street and snow, we had said we were going to use about $450,000 because that equipment was expensive, and we wanted to put another snow gate in place, and so we needed some additional equipment. So the budget was basically put in place knowing that we were going to use fund balance to fund some of that equipment. You kind of have the same situation here. We're back up to the GFOA, Government Finance Officer Association. Their best practice states that cities and fund balances should keep 2 months of reserve, which basically you take your total expenditure budget, divide it by 12, times it by 2. And that should be reflected in your available fund balance if for some reason another recession would hit. If something catastrophic would happen, you would have that money there, and it wouldn't kind of cripple your ability to continue to give services. So we're back up to that point. So it's not like we're hurting for fund balance. But it's really, again, up to you guys where you feel those dollars should be used. And if you feel that there are things that are important enough to be taken out of those, that's up to you to make that determination. And then we just have to work in the next couple of years to bring that back and make sure that we kind of try to stay at that 2-month reserve limit.
I guess I'll say this. I mean, some of the comments that were being made out there last week, they were hard to take because I knew they were true. And going out there and checking it out personally today, I mean, that was tough to see. And obviously, we've set an awful high standard now with the new complex we got in place, but that doesn't change the fact that we've got to take care of what we got. I mean, I heard some numbers here. I mean, you guys had made some recommendations. There was a recommendation made, roughly $42,000 that was cut in looking at the mayor's budget now. And I heard the numbers that, the fund balance relative to two months worth of expenditures, there's about a $40,000 difference in there roughly that we still would have to play with to still maintain that 2 month. I appreciate where you're coming from, Michelle. I've always admired you as far as your conservative approach to budgeting. This is a case where I would definitely be in favor of tapping into some of those reserves. I mean, if that $40,000 to replace the scoreboards are one of the first things that people are going to see when they come to look at a complex. If their scoreboard's not working, that reflects poorly on the entire community right off the bat. I would love to see those scoreboards fixed. I'd like to see you try the French drain, or what do you call it? I mean, that would be a relatively inexpensive attempt to solve the drainage. But I also heard the need for a groom or two expressed. That I would sure like to see us dip into our reserves a little bit if a couple of those expenditures would cure a lot of the problems that we're seeing out there.
Well, and then one thing too that we discussed this morning, and this is actually in the park system budget, but it's we had requested one of the wide area mowers, and that probably, I know if you'd ask Wade, that would be the most critical need we have out there, because we're dropping mowers left and right here the way it seems, and to keep mowing equipment on the fields has been very difficult. That's actually, I'm jumping ahead, but that was something we had requested in the Parks Division budget, but with the budget cuts, that was one thing that we also took out. But actually, as of this time, we have a great need for an additional wide area mower, and no, they're very expensive, but they're kind of, hate to use the term specialized, but they are specialized. They're kind of a 3-in-1 mower. They're going to mow swaths from 10.5 to 11 feet, and you really have to have them to get large areas mowed in a short amount of time as best you can.
Where would you use that, Jay? All over, or?
Well, all over, but we really need to have one very dependable piece of mowing equipment that we just station out at Premier Complex, and they'd be responsible for the Premier Complex and the soccer fields, and that's a lot of mowing out there.
And you say we don't have a dependable mower station there?
We're kind of scrambling. We had one mower go down this summer that we don't have replacement parts for, and it's basically a piece of junk, so we're not going to be able to go farther with that. Basically, Wade would like to have, and if you'd like Wade to explain it better, I'm sure he could, but basically one needs to have 4 mowers going basically 5 days a week. And so we've kind of had 5 to give us a little cushion that if one goes down, we can have someone jump on another mower. Well, now we've been going with 4, and probably today, this week, we've probably only been going with 2 because there's repairs needed on the other ones as well. And one of them, they're waiting on some parts now, but that sounds like it has some quite serious issues.
I've got 3 things written down here: mower, scoreboards, and groomer. Concern I have is if with the new facility is that if we don't have the right equipment to maintain it, then we shouldn't have built it. And because it's just going to slowly just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And we have that challenge with something that ages anyway. But if we said a mower, if we said a groomer, and if we said scoreboards, let's just 20, where groomer is about 25. The mower was, well, I heard 2 numbers, John Deere and Toro.
Right, and I think we could reduce that 60,000 number. The quote I got from John Deere was 48,000, and that looks like a very good piece of equipment.
So if you take the mower, the scoreboards, and the groomer, you're roughly about $90,000 to $95,000, right? I don't think, in my mind, at least, and I'm going by what you say, I don't think those are niceties. I think there's a difference of dipping in for a nicety versus a requirement. And to me, those things, that's a valid reason to go into that reserve so that we can not only take care of what we have, but take care of the new one that we got as well. There is a slight benefit to us in the regard of we will have some labor savings because we aren't going to have people running back and forth and loading. We can have a group over and they can do their job and get it. We got 12 fields that we're going to do almost every day. And you technically right now, you should do every one of those fields with a groomer.
Actually, it's 16 fields counting foundation.
Right, that's exactly right. I'm not sure how you're going to do that with one groomer in an 8-hour period. And then throw in breaks and everything else.
How often?
It's not going to happen.
How often do we groom right now? Typically, how often do we
Wade,
groom?
Are we on about a once a week schedule?
Probably not even that. I mean, going back and forth between the 2 complexes, we don't have a trailer to haul it. Right.
Technically, let's be honest. Technically, you're grooming every day. You're just not grooming with the right equipment the right way.
Right.
Okay, because you are setting those fields every day for play, correct?
Correct.
Monday through Friday at a minimum.
Digging would be a good way to say it.
So, right. I just want to clear that up. You're using them every day. You got 12 fields to do for the most part.
You know, I got to say, we gave you guys a hell of a lot more grass to take care of, and we definitely need something to accommodate that. I just can't imagine not having the right equipment to do that. And I concur with Glenn. We did all that renovation to Cook. What did we spend? $300,000 out there for that renovation. And anyway, to have crappy scoreboards, and we bring all these tournaments to town just about every weekend. That's crazy to me. I think the scoreboards for sure got to go back, and I would agree with the mower. Shelley, how do we pay for that then?
Okay. Well, like I said, it would come out of their available fund balance, which, like I said, over the last 5 years, we've built it back up. So it's not like there's a danger that we're going to go into a negative cash balance situation. So, again, when we start this process, it's our policy to start with a balanced budget, not using any reserve. And that's really up to you guys to determine, how comfortable you are with doing that. So, because the mower is in a completely different division, when we're talking about the baseball, softball, if you guys want to put that back in, the groomer and the scoreboards are in this budget. So if you want to put them back in, which I completely support that. I'm with you guys. You would just need to make a motion to put those back in, and then the mower would be addressed in the parks, because that's where the $60,000 request was at, and where the mayor's proposed has taken that out.
But it's kind of.
It's all one fund. The 90,000 will come out. Yep, and it's always the hope that they're going to exceed their expenditures, and 17 isn't over. They're not anticipating doing that, but they're not far off of where they were last year, and they were able in 16 to exceed that. So I mean, there is that hope that we will make up that balance even in 17 to help going into 18.
I would make the motion to restore the 25,000 for the groomer and the 17,000 for the scoreboard that was originally requested.
I'll second that.
And again, I agree with that, and I am going to vote for that, but I'm a very conservative individual, and I know most of you very well over the years, and I know we're all pretty conservative. I see this as a need and not a nicety or a want. I really do. And if we're going to have these products, I'm with Glenn in that it was very hard for me to defend ourselves when I have seen these places. And this is not just this year. And I know Wade's in here, and this is not a Wade issue. Okay? If we don't give him the tools to work with, how's he going to do his job? And I think that's what we're going to see. And I believe next year will only be worse if we don't do something because of the bringing on of the new facility.
So, Glenn,
only
you're
gonna
not
get worse.
You're not proposing the mower then?
Well, that's a separate.
Okay.
Different department, Bruce.
Okay.
Shouldn't we see? We should see an increase coming in with the new premier softball fields too, correct?
As far as tournaments and stuff, yes.
As far as revenue and stuff, I mean. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
So we have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam to restore the 25,000 for a groomer and 17,000 for scoreboard back into the budget for softball and baseball complex.
To be taken from the reserve.
To be taken from reserve. Any further discussion? Yeah, I had a second from Lallam. No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
No, thank you. It will be very much appreciated.
Welcome.
Very well used.
Jay, I do have one more question before we get off the baseball softball complex. Looking at the water, the water budget, how can we not be increasing our 2018 budget request by adding an entirely new complex over and above what we expect to expend for 17?
Well, some of that money was included in the 17 budget for water because we were, as we were growing the fields in, we were using it. So, hopefully we're going to be fine, and I think we're good where we're at, and let's just monitor that and see where we go. Because, I think one thing we're finding is that, at times we really put a lot of water on that field, but here lately, as we were doing that grow in, the fertilization and reseeding and all that, we were actually using a little less water following Todd's plan that he put together for that.
Is it coming out of the pool?
No, we better not use that water.
We have no other use for it, so we just use it up there.
Just checking.
Way to go, Todd.
Any other questions on the softball, baseball? Otherwise, we can keep moving. If you guys want to break at any time, I know we're at about 7:45. I don't know if anybody wants to get up and stretch, or if you just want to keep going.
Let's go another 15 minutes and take 5.
Okay, well, just don't ever say I didn't allow you a break, so. All right, you move on to auditorium, Fieldhouse, Jay.
Okay, we'll keep moving on, and you know, a couple of these divisions I think are going to move a little quicker as we go forward here. Not a lot of, get a lot of great use in the field house. That 7,000 square feet of turf we got out there, it really is amazing how well that gets used by all kinds of groups, including the figure skaters were in there this summer. They did training, several training classes this summer with the coach from South Dakota State University. So that continues to go very well. Changes in auditorium field house, just looking here. Temp salaries added a small amount there. That's kind of to for programming and supervision at the field house, to have a programmer there, and it's also for custodial services at the field house. And then moving forward into expenditures, the only real big one we see is that with the change in phone system, and that's where our administrative offices are located, that we're already identifying a pretty significant increase in phone service, and so we see an increase in that line item. Am I missing anything on? Nope. Okay.
Jay, what were you requesting? The 25,000 improvements to buildings that was not reflected in the mayor's budget.
In the auditorium field house, that was for the new Prairie Lakes Wellness Center forecourts that we were looking at possible matting, surfacing material for that floor if we were to get some other event, say a gun show, something like that. Right? Yep. And, that was one thing that we decided to eliminate from the budget as somewhat of a nicety as we were going through the process.
Just so I know, the way that's set up now, anything as it relates to your area of management over there now at the Wellness Center is not in John's budget, right? It's separated, or how's that working?
Revenues will all go to this budget, the 45128 auditorium field house. So basketball tournament, soccer tournament all gets deposited as a revenue through the Park and Rec department, not the 204 account of the Wellness Center. Okay. So yeah, all the revenues do go to the 201 account.
Okay, but is the Wellness Center taking on the full load of all the operating expenses over there? Utilities,
but not,
whatever.
Maintenance-wise, our full-time maintenance person that does the auditorium field house pool will go on after a tournament and do the maintenance on it. Day-to-day operation, John's staff will do the...
Okay, so utilities, insurance, all of those types of costs, though, are all falling under the wellness facility.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's important to know as we evaluate the progress of the wellness facility, right. The rec side of it, part of the rec
right.
center
and
part of it.
If you look at this revenue budget, Mike, we went from 18 to 36, so 18,000 projected revenue from the big four gym will be going to the 201 account under auditorium field house, but ultimately the utility bills, everything else is going to fall into the 204 account.
So you get the revenue and you don't get the expenses.
Life is great.
That is good. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that, right. Because that is a Park and Rec. It was always been intended for a Park and Rec enhancement of, our facilities available for that type of programming. Most of those costs are running under the wellness facility. Just
on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
On special events, the Park and Rec does incur.
Right. Some of the labor, no. Right. Equipment, no.
Right.
But the general operating costs.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's where Shelley and I discussed, the expenditures following the revenue. We were going to transfer that revenue or potentially to the Wellness Center, but a lot of those expenditures do fall into the 201 Park and Rec account after the major events, not the day-to-day, but the major events. So
Where does the HVAC, like AC heat for the gyms, where would that go to?
that's all going to be under the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center budget.
Okay. Would it make sense? Is there a way to separate that out somehow? No? A percentage
No,
or?
I had asked that during the construction, knowing that, you know, they were going to be run by two separate, to get them metered separately. And,
Yeah.
Well, what
and
we had,
there's not a good way because you have the pool. And so, you know, I was kind of told, I mean, you can come up with an estimate, but
yeah, it was going to be cost prohibitive. It didn't make any sense
Right.
when to put that amount of money back into it, Bruce, to have that division. And we said if we're going to allocate costs back, then let's come up with just some pro-rata number.
right.
And that's what it is.
Right. And there's a lot
that
of-
may need to get looked at some point.
Right.
But I just
Yeah.
think that's important because we're going to come up on John's budget here, and we're going to talk about the wellness facility and how it's performing, and we're going to be watching that as it'll be under
Right.
the microscope of the public and such too. So,
Yeah.
but it's not just the wellness facility. It's if this building was someplace else, and it would be under your budget.
Correct.
And I think that's important to know. So.
But the other thing to remember too is that, you know, the members of the wellness center do benefit. You know, they spill into that flat floor space, so they have a lot more ability. And John also doesn't have to pay the rent he used to hold those tournaments. And so, you know, there is a bit of a trade-off on both ways. And I think the members are getting some of that benefit, and John's able to do some programming without having to rent the high school space that he did. So, you know, there is some give and take there. But, you know, I guess we've never sat down and looked at who's benefiting and who's not the most.
I think, though, too, Shelley, that I think that was probably more important for us to look at that when the wellness facility did not answer into and under the Park and Rec. You know, now it's less of an issue. We just need to understand, as we're assessing the performance of something, that some of those costs are in there that normally would not be, is my point.
I think it's always helpful to keep in mind what we're seeing for current expenditures is for the auditorium and the field house.
Correct.
You know, we've got that auditorium sitting there that we've got to make a decision at some point down the road what we're going to do with that. As I recall, we've tried to break out those costs specifically for the auditorium in the past. And I think it's a figure like $30,000-$40,000 a year or something. Is that still a pretty good ballpark number?
Yeah, minus the full-time staff, O&M is right around that, 35
Okay.
to 40,000.
I guess I just want us to always keep that number in our mind that building is costing us a fair amount of money every year, and it kind of gets blended in when it gets merged with the field house.
I think the last time we looked at it, we looked at the utility costs, the cleaning, and then the part-time cleaning staff that we probably wouldn't have if we didn't have that building. I think it was like 42-ish, 42, 43 for that. But that was, I don't know, was it last year? Time flies. Year or two ago when we were asked that question, we tried to kind of break it up as good as we could.
So there's no labor in that 35 to 40? It's just the...
No labor.
Okay.
The actual auditorium budget's right around 100,000. But that would include a full-time salary who does the pool, the auditorium, the field house, wellness center.
Okay, so it
it's all
wouldn't...
budgeted under that account.
Okay, so that person wouldn't be dedicated to that. They're kind of split between a number of different efforts. What all goes on in there now? What's really going on?
Basically, our basement is the biggest. You know, we have a long-standing relationship with the Weight Watchers. They've been there for 15 years. In the multi-purpose room, we have Arrowhead Archery that does archery lessons down there. We have our pottery program is held in the basement, which consists of about 500 participants. Our art room is down there. You know, none of these art and pottery things were ever considered in the new buildings, including the field house. You know, we don't have a space for that. If we chose to cease the operation of the auditorium, we would have to find a location, probably a rental of an uptown studio or what it may be, but they're popular enough that we can't do away with these programs. But we never did consider these in the new construction or when we took over the field house. As far as the gym, you know, the double court, we plan on programming that as far as open gyms for community members, plus the school district does plan on utilizing that 4 to 6 p.m. for probably freshman practice after school in both the fall and winter season.
And we still get a fair number of birthday parties that use the auditorium.
Right. I mean, it's got its use. You'll never rebuild that building for the amount of operational dollars we put in. But there is some serious capital improvement that needs to be put in that building, from a roof to plumbing, HVAC. You know, obviously it's a 75-year-old building and it's showing it. So
Yeah, I think that ultimately, Glenn, and that's an excellent point, because we've said that, you know, at one point, does it go away from the city's use anyway? And I don't know when that is, because it sounds like we have it and there is a value to it. I think your capital requirements for maintenance on it are going to be the driving force at some point. We're going to have to make some pretty big decisions. Are you going to put money back into it, or what are you going to do?
Ballpark, Mike, I'd say $300,000 to $400,000 to get it to a full functional building again.
Okay, I think you need to get the wrecking ball in there then. No, I'm kidding. No, that's probably going to be the driving factor at some point, I think.
Any other questions on the auditorium field house? Okay, we'll move on to zoo.
Okay. We'll let Terry step aside and bring Dan in here.
I said, can you get a big light for me?
Just looking at 2017 as Dan sits down here, you know, he really did a lot of work changing out exhibits in the main Discovery Center there, replacing some of the mounts that were there with the new Dakota language and culture exhibit. It's very nice and just adds that different flavor when you're in that part of the zoo, and it works out really well. And it's also the some of the plant materials that Dan has been so dedicated in planning around the zoo. Looks very, very nice to have the different native plants and to see the pollinator gardens and to see them doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's kind of fun and a very good educational tool. Moving on to the budget, salary, there was adjustment there, and Dan had requested a visitor services assistant to basically help him in the concessions area and the membership aspect of the zoo and Lake Area Zoological Society, but just felt that that was one of the areas as we were trying to balance our budget that we couldn't afford at this time, so that was cut in that employment aspect of it. And revenues, we are looking at 50-cent fee increase for both adult and child membership fees, correct, Dan?
Yep.
Okay. So in that that will increase our revenue about $19,000.
Is this number right? As I look at your budget summary, when we talk about your miscellaneous revenues in 15, 16, and down then the 17, they're basically half or less than half. Is that correct?
Well, we went from the subsidy, I'd have to look it up, but we've gone, let's see, 17. Yeah, I got to look at. I don't have the sheet.
Remember, Mike, we changed and Shelley, you can chime in too. Remember, we've changed the way we're accounting for the revenues coming in from the zoo. that is now coming in directly to the city, and as a result, we're not getting we're not getting the reimbursement from the Zoological Society like we used to. That's why you're seeing the drop in the miscellaneous revenue.
Well, we should have seen the. I don't believe that should be true, Glenn. Because if we took it on, we should be seeing it directly to us and not.
If I could explain, the other miscellaneous revenue that used to be for things like scrap iron and stuff like that that we got rid of, but when we took over some of the stuff from the Lake Area Zoological Society last year, the items such as gift shop, penny machines, rides, and feeders are included in that miscellaneous revenue budget. So that's why the increase.
See, we took you guys got the memberships, you guys get the carousel, you get the feeders revenue now.
Oh, so the charges for goods and services went up, and the miscellaneous went down.
Yes.
Okay, it's an offset, basically.
It's an offset.
Okay, I'm sorry. There we go. Yep.
Dan, I have also a question on your performance measures. I was looking at your attendance. You've got a number, it doesn't make sense, in 217,000 actual. The first half is almost 35,000. Is that a misprint, or am I misreading that incorrectly?
It's under performance measures, and what is it after?
Attendance at special events. You've got that second 2017 actual, first half of the year, you got 34,900. And then you're estimating for the year to be 11,500?
That was the actual. Oh, I made a mistake, because the actual for 17 was something else. I made a mistake there.
Okay, so
it should be, it should be 11.5, I think, instead of the number I put down.
Okay.
Because that's what we totally
But that
did.
would have been for the first half of 2017.
Yes.
So we'd be less than 11.5 as well.
Yeah. It's just
oh, maybe it was 4,900, the dollar sign?
4,900.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Dan, I'll ask a question also. The total attendance you've got for the first 6 months at 21,000, and you expect 67,000 for the complete year in 18. Is that right?
Yes. We've taken it up to 70,000 people through the zoo. Maybe I'm
even through June at that number, you've still been able to accommodate that?
for the 17, we're estimating 65,500 for total for the year.
Their June and their July, August is way heavier than their May, June. Just weather related, kids are out of school, you have other people coming through the zoo. So, I mean, if you would ever look at their month to month, and that's where a lot of their rec stuff from the first half, it's really hard to judge what you're going to do for the rest of the year, both expenditure and revenue wise, because you're really just kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of it.
I mean, our Zoo Boo is our big event, and a couple of years ago we had 4,400 people at that event. So that basically, a lot of times our attendance depend upon 3 or 4 special events.
Yeah, and the Midco Free Day that was held a couple of weeks ago, that was close to 4,000 for attendance, I believe.
Yeah, that was 48 something, 42 or something. No, 30, I'm sorry. 3842 was the number.
Okay, and then as we look as expenditure increases, the equipment maintenance and building maintenance, as some of the equipments in the buildings get older, Dan is experiencing and has experienced this summer additional expenses in that area. So we look to an increase in those line items.
We also asked for a roof for our Discovery Center, and that was turned down. And it is a building that was built 20 years ago. Just so you're aware of that.
And then the budget reflects that we did decrease some of the livestock and poultry feed by $4,000, and that's more to stay in line again with historical spending that we have at the zoo. And then again, the phone service, again, with the new phone carrier, we're experiencing increases in phone service, and we feel that we'll be needing an increase in that line item.
And then the capital expenses for new cat caging. Again, that's pretty important to have, I guess.
Mike was wondering if you're getting any more otters.
We
Yeah,
have.
We have one. Now we have one, and I named it after my dad, Don the Otter. So you guys have to come see my dad.
Yeah, and he's just getting out and about now for the last couple of weeks, I think, Dan, right?
Yeah, they're mixed. Great.
I would love to see you name, if you get another one, I'd like to see you name it Mike. I really would.
We will.
Yeah.
We will.
Unless it's a girl.
I don't
No,
know
still,
if
name it Mike.
you know, when you have three of them, you know what happens sometimes. I appreciate your support for the zoo. I really do. You guys have been very gracious and
Well,
supportive.
I want to commend, commended Todd a while ago for the golf course. I want to commend you, Dan, and your crew for the zoo that we put forth here in Watertown. We don't have to take a back seat to anybody, and I want to give you a lot of credit for that.
Thank you.
Any more questions on the zoo? Move on to the ice arena. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Not a lot of, I guess the big thing was in the current ice arena, still working on the plans for the new two-sheet ice arena, but in the current ice arena, we spent some money last year and replaced those compressors, and we had an outstanding season with them. Everything worked really, really well, so we're hoping to get another season out of that. And so there's not a great deal of change in the ice arena budget for this year. In fact, the biggest increase would be $500 in the building maintenance to just keep up with things as they need repair.
Jay, do we still have it that the manager of City Park then does this in the other half of the season?
Yes.
And who is that now?
Doug Taken?
Okay, so it is still Doug, because I
Yeah.
thought he was leaving at some point. Wasn't he going to leave like a year ago or something? Thinking of leaving? So it is Doug, because
Yeah.
okay, because I know he.
Well, he did. Doug Taken is also our park manager at City Park, and he did request, and we granted that he move out of the housing at City Park last summer, and he bought his own residence in town to just get a break from the park every once in a while, and that type of thing. I don't know. That's probably what you're
That's what
thinking
I'm
about.
referring to. I know that there was a consideration of leaving because of that. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to see him stay, because I've been out at City Park a number of times in the last few years as we've started camping again. He's done a great job. People like him very well out there.
Absolutely, absolutely.
How many camp hosts do we use? Do we use camp hosts out there?
Yes.
How many do we got? Mike wants to know if he can be one next year.
Well, I think he sure can, but we just got the one right now, and they're wonderful folks. I don't really know if we got a required number of hours. Is it 24 hours a week, or we don't really? I know when I was with the state park system, we required at least 24 hours a week, and after 50 hours, you'd say, "Hey, go home for a while now," because that's kind of the way volunteers work, because they just love the atmosphere and love being out in the parks and around the people. So they're very beneficial to a campground, that's for sure.
Jay, as we're going to be talking about capital projects here in the coming days, we don't know where we're at in our ability to fund the new ice facility, right? We know we have a shortfall, and the mayor had expressed that the other day. If we run into a glitch that doesn't enable us to do this in the timeframes that we ideally would like to, Are there any major problems that we need to be aware of in that facility that could be coming? We talked about the compressors, right? I know we did those, I think, 18 grand or whatever it was last year?
17 or 18
Yeah.
last year. And that worked very well.
Any other lurking surprises that you think could come, Terry, Gabe?
No, we have an issue with the lean-to locker rooms. I mean, we've had north side. We've had issues with those, with water leaks, different things like that. Compressors are the unknown. We, like I said, we did put the 18,000 in to get us to function last year. They're a day away or they're 5 years away. They're aged. They're original compressor units. That's the scary part. That's some dollars, no question.
But that's kind of our big one then. I mean,
That's
if they
the big one.
function, we function fairly well, albeit in an older
Absolutely.
building. We know we have issues and we got capacity issues. But
Right.
so it really comes down to how those compressors work then.
Correct.
Okay.
We've got an $80,000 resurfacer, that's been with us for a dozen to 15 years. So far running great. We maintain it. We do preventive maintenance, new tires. So we don't foresee anything happen, but that could be the other large ticket item.
Right, but that's outside of a new facility.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, the plan is to bring that over. If we get it, that's a $80,000 saving to bring that piece of equipment to
Right.
the new one.
Right.
I was always concerned about the boards. I was that company doesn't make them anymore, and that could be we're
Yeah.
a few
And-
good
and-
checks away from new boards too.
Right. Yeah, we bought batter boards, which instead of dasher boards, what batter boards are basically designed for outdoor roller hockey. The 15 years ago or 12 years ago when we got them, that's what the budget allowed. So we have, like I said, batter boards, which you put somebody against them, the whole place shakes. But we do have in the budget, part of the new project is the main rink to get dasher boards, which are NHL quality boards. So, and the second rink right now is not in the budget to have boards, and I think that was challenged to the Hockey Association to see if they can come up with those funds to, even if that's a secondary style of board, that's more of a figure skating, open skate style rink, not as imperative as the main rink, but definitely our boards are, even from the get-go, we're not quality, but they've served us well. Other short of a few broken glass, but really they've held up. But that was definitely a budget restraint 10, 12, 15 years ago.
And we do have a maintenance contract, and they do a wonderful job, and they're always at our beck and call, and they do a wonderful job keeping that facility up and running.
Any other questions on the ice arena? Okay. Want to move on to parks systems?
We've talked about it somewhat with softball. This is a budget where that mower that we were discussing is located, but just an awful lot of stuff from Derby Downs to all the neighborhood parks to all the complexes. Just a lot going on for Wade and his crew in this parks budget. As we look in temporary salary, we did have an increase, and that's what we talked about earlier with the baseball, softball, that $10,450. That was for the mowers, including the baseball, softball mowers. We had the reduction in the baseball, softball division, but this reflects that increase where that went in the park system budget. So I don't know, if you would wish, we could switch those two numbers around and get them a little more accurate and reflective of where it's being used.
You're talking about moving the mower and the time and stuff
I'm actually
back.
talking about our temporary salaries line item. You had mentioned, I had mentioned earlier that some of the mowing temporary salary, those dollars that are used at the baseball and softball fields were reflected in the park system budget, and that therefore we had that reduction in the baseball softball budget.
I can't speak for the mayor and I can't speak for Shelley. I know what I would want if I'm trying to manage it, because as you get questions or I want detail, I want to know where my costs are. I don't want to guess. I want to know where they're at. I want my, as best as possible, real costs. So that's up to you guys what you do there. I'm just saying from my perspective,
I agree with you, Mike.
that's where I'd be at.
See, I think the challenge for Wade is we don't have dedicated mowers other than Anza and Premier. You know, they may mow in Nelson Park, but then they go over and mow Cook Complex. So it's hard to differentiate those number of hours per week of how many are they mowing in parks versus ball complexes. I mean, he's got 5 mowers doing hundreds of acres.
Right, but at the end of a day or at the end of a week or at the end of a year, you know how many times you mow.
Absolutely.
You can do a prorated thing on your costs
Right.
just to get it allocated to the right place.
Right.
Collect them if you want to in one spot, but allocate them out if you want. But I do have one question on the parks thing. The new Lions Club building, is that right?
Yes, Lions
Okay.
Park.
Lions Park. Is that, what's our obligation on that in this whole thing? Is that
They're
in
going
here
to turn
anywhere?
that over to us, and then we'll take over the maintenance of that facility.
So is there anything in here in regards to the cost of us taking that over?
Not a great deal in this budget, you know, probably some janitorial supplies and that type of thing, but, you know, a new facility, we're hoping that it functions well the first few years, and it's, I don't know if you've been in it, but it is an absolutely beautiful facility.
I have not been there, but I mean, do we have to, we insure it then, if it's ours, right? So we should make sure that we understand what our costs are gonna be and get them allocated properly there or accounted for, planned for, if there's gonna be something, which there should be something in there.
Right,
somewhere.
and that hasn't been turned over to the city yet at this time, but I think in the near future that it will be. So, and then we'll also gain some revenue from shelter rentals at that facility as well. And Terry just pointed out that it is reflected that part of our electrical cost budget for the line item in electricity is for an increase for the Lions Park as well as the 5-plex softball complex and a new Premier softball complex.
Jay, I see you have money in for the bike trail. Can you give us an update on where that whole process is?
Well, actually, we have received 5 RFPs for developing the route for the remaining 3.65 miles, I think, of trail that goes around Lake Kempesca. And we were, in fact, Shane and Mayor Karen and myself reviewed those yesterday, and we should be getting those in front of the park board with our recommendations, as well as I think they'll be on the agenda for the September 5th council meeting. So that will really get the ball rolling and get a plan put down. A lot of public input meetings would be planned with that. So, you know, not only do we have a trail route, we have people that understand and support that route that's selected.
Jay, I'm glad to hear that, but it looks like we're not anticipating anything to get done in 2017.
And that would be in the 212 budget? This is the 201?
No, but I'm looking at the feet of new bike trail. There's 0 estimated for 2017. So that's telling me, I don't care about the dollar. And was telling me
Okay. Yeah, you know, by the time we get this all done, you know, if we anticipate March, April, and, you know, hopefully we'll be applying for some potential grants and putting some projects together.
No, I'm talking about 2017 yet. There's nothing anticipated being done.
As of right now, no.
Okay.
No. We would like to clean up some of those small areas like the 3rd Avenue to Kemp and some of those areas like that. Finish off Memorial Park to Parkview Drive and that type of thing, but we'll just have to see once yet on that this fall. one of the big line items under the expenditures in the park system is the rent for machinery and equipment. We actually increase that as we talk about this mower now. We increase that line item thinking if we'd want to possibly do a long-term lease on this equipment and lease to purchase type of thing and put it in the budget that way. So that's what those dollars are reflected for.
Shelley, that comes out of the O&M then, right, on a lease and not capital?
It all depends. If you do a lease to own and we're actually going to own the equipment, then no. That is actually considered debt because it's a loan. So it'd be like our fire truck, it'd be like what our golf carts used to be. We'd have to show it as a long-term debt, and then we would do that appropriately. It would not be an operating. If we just rented it, like what we're doing now with the golf carts, we're in 5 years, they go back, they don't belong to us, then it would be an operating rental fee basically, because we're never going to own the piece of equipment. So
But to do the ownership, the rent-to-own thing, really all we're doing is just paying for some expensive financing, really, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, basically a $48,000 mower will cost about $53,000. So, yeah, I mean, there's always that implicit interest rate in there. And I think you checked with bank financing, and they were at about, what,
4.42.
Right. So, I mean, that's what you have to look at. Do you
Would that
take
still
them?
be able to come out of the fund, that 201 fund that we talked about?
Yes. Yeah, it just wouldn't come out at $48,000.
Right, it would come out
in
incrementally each year.
I think it's the one that's the most cost advantageous. You'd pay $10,000 up front, and then you'd pay 5 years worth of payments at like $8,500. So that would be reflected that way, versus you just doing a one-time expenditure.
Yeah, that one was $10,000 up front, as Shelley said, and then 5 payments of $87.40 for a total of $53,703.35 for a $48,000 quote.
Yep.
Is that covered in that 12,000? Is there something else in there with that?
Well, you know, we were playing around with this with different at the time, and I just got some of this information in the past few days.
But
here,
that was
so
that whole 12,000 was for
in
this.
that line item, yeah.
So the budget would change if you decided to take a mower out of reserves. The 12,000 would disappear, and it would be 48,000 down below where we took it out at. We took the 60 out, but it would come back at 48.
Right.
And so it's really a $36,000 increase from.
And we did have a little money,
Not 48.
extra money in that rental line item to cover if we, an edger or something like that, if we want to.
So you wouldn't drop that down to zero?
We had it at 500 in the previous budget.
Okay.
So if you leased, or if you rent to own or lease, it was $10,000 the first year, or $10,000 and then plus the $50-some $100?
It was that payment structure would be $10,000 down payment, and then 5 payments for $8,740.
When does the first of the 5 payments start? Would that
on top of the 10?
So would you know what I mean?
Okay. I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know if it explains that in here.
My guess is first year would be 15,000 something.
Yeah, it's like $8,700, 5 payments.
Oh, it's 8,700. So I don't. Yeah. So it'd be the first year would be the.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're making a $10,000 down payment, and then you're financing $38,000 for 5 years.
Yeah.
And Mike, when we came up with the original 12,000, that was based on a different manufacturer that Todd researched, and then Jay came up with a modified alternate manufacturer. So the other lease option, and I don't know, does this still would it need to be bid, since the purchase price is still over $50,000, even if you do a lease to own?
Right. If the machine ends up over 50,000, which this one is 48, so it would be under.
Right.
But if you would look at other options that would be over 50, you would need to bid it regardless, just like the just like your 45 carts, we have to bid those out.
How comfortable are you? I know that the Toro, I think, was the $60-some thousand
Right.
one versus the John Deere. Do we have experience with the John Deere to know? I think we do with the Toro, don't we?
We have great experience with the Toro, and they're very well respected by our staff. Not a lot of experience with the John Deere. I guess Todd could probably answer that question more. That at previous positions, he's worked with John Deere equipment and has had pretty good success with it. So,
Jay, I got a question for you over here. Would we be able to or do any kind of maintenance in that locally then, if we went through John Deere? Because as far as I know, there's no Toro dealer in town, is there?
no, there's no Toro dealer in town. For maintenance, where would you have to take a Toro piece of equipment? Omaha?
For big shop type stuff, it would have to be trailer down there. The problem with John Deere is in the service. Even though we have a John Deere dealer here, we run into that with some of our utility carts out there. We have smaller gators and runabouts that they sell that they would deem to be used for farm service, that they will service and we can get parts locally. But we also have a larger utility cart, heavy duty, that's geared specifically towards golf and sports turf, that you can't get parts through them. You have to go through a golf dealer, so to speak, for John Deere. And that closest one is Gettysburg, C&B operations. John Deere, when it comes to this type of mower, has been pretty good, pretty solid, reputable. I would have no objection with them putting it in their fleet. Again, with parts and availability, I'm not sure. This is with RDO equipment, and I know we did purchase through lease one of my tractors from RDO out of Webster just a couple years ago, and I've had great luck with them for service and parts and updates and everything there. So I would be comfortable going this route.
Can we look at putting in a maintenance contract? I mean, if we put it out to bid, a lot of times they'll put a maintenance contract in there with other equipment. I don't know if the mowers are that type of equipment.
Well,
but
standard they usually are. When it goes out to bid, most of them will come with a 2-year minimum parts and labor warranty. I know Toro is that way. Anything after that, you're paying for all the standard maintenance, belts,
sure,
bearings, things like that. But anything big, it's 2-year parts and labor warranty. I'm not exactly sure where they're at on theirs, but I know it's that way with Toro.
And I haven't checked into that either as I was putting this together for the meeting this evening.
yeah, that would be interesting to know what kind of warranty / maintenance program they have, where their maintenance guy would come out of to do it. You know, what kind of turn time we would be looking at, how long we would be down potentially if something happened. You know, if they're driving from Omaha, you know, you're at the discretion whenever they come, you know, to be able to fix it. Or if we have to take it down there, we have to send the guy down there, it's going to take him 3.5 hours, and he's a full day minimum.
Well, from experience, most of these guys are very reputable, and when you do have a big problem, they will be there, you know, as fast as they can.
Sure.
A lot of times, at least with my reps at the golf course, if they have one available and you call them and they're coming to take yours, they'll trailer a demo or a used one up so that you're not without while yours is being fixed. So it's a pretty good working relationship there too.
For either brand?
I would say John Deere would be reputable in that perspective too. So
I know in history that we have made some poor decisions based on price, and I just want to make sure that we're not doing that here. You know, you can get a lemon on any one of them, right? But let's not go on price to get something and then suffer, and we have done that. So I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
it's our perception that it's a good product. So.
And I've been working with these guys when they first approached me about, you know, what can we do with the monies that have been allocated towards this, and I did make that one recommendation not to look into this company based on our history. So.
Does anybody have any strong feelings one way or the other on whether you outright purchase or whether you'd be comfortable with a lease to own?
I would think we should buy it. I mean, I don't know why we'd want to give somebody $5,000 if we have the money, and I suppose we can argue we don't, but I would say that we would just buy it out. That'd be my thought.
I agree.
I agree with that too.
Does somebody want to make that
I
motion
would make
to
that motion that we would purchase the John Deere.
Okay,
on the recommendation.
and then take out the operating rental
Right.
portion. Okay.
How, do we want to say that would include the options that you're looking for, or is that going to? You're still going to leave some in the O&M for
Are you
that?
going to maintain that 500, Shelley, for last year's budget?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be the 11,500 that we increased to get to that 12.
Thank you.
And then the 60,000 we would place at what, 48 or?
I guess for me, I like rounding. I just round it to 50. I mean,
If it's 50,
it's
that's
up to
gonna
you.
bid,
It's
right?
your motion. But I like round numbers. They just add better.
Where's the bidding? Where's the bidding stop?
50,000 is the bid. Yeah.
It
Is
is.
50,000, then you have to bid it.
Anything that exceeds 50, which
What's
would
your price on it?
include
I'm
everything.
one of these guys that I don't like even numbers, Shelley, because
This
I think
was-
it creates
This
fluff,
quote was 48,000.
and
Yeah,
that's what
but-
we should do.
Okay, but
Yeah.
here's the problem. You're not going to get it this year. This is a 2018 budget, and they aren't going to guarantee 48,000 in 2018. So that's
that's
the
Yeah,
only
If they get it for
that's the
48, then
only.
you saved a couple grand.
I mean
you
that's
put
your
50.
only concern
you have to
is
make
if it
motion
will
up
still
to
be
50 then.
48
Up
6
to
months from
okay,
now.
I changed my motion to up to $50,000. Well, $50,000 then, and hopefully that'll cover it for next year's inflation.
And if for some reason it comes in at or above 50, then it's going to have to go out for bidding.
Correct, and
Okay.
you'll have
Then
to
you guys
approve
cover that.
Yeah, and you'll have to approve that anyway, so it'll come back in front of you.
I have a motion from Albertson. Is there a second? Second from Danforth. Any further discussion? All right, the motion was 50,000 for mower.
John Deere.
And reduce the line item for rental machinery and equipment down to 500.
And that, Mayor, to come out of the, 201 fund? 201 fund reserve.
Right, we're in the 201 fund. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Does anybody else have any other quick questions? Otherwise, I think we'll take a 5-minute break. We good with that? Yep. Okay.
Things are looking up. I only had to go.
The sewer.
I don't remember.